do that. I think like financial advisor is the other one that people think of. And it's like, oh, and then it's on Facebook and they've changed their picture. They're in a suit. And then, and then you get a DM like, hey, it's been a while. We should catch up. And you're like, no.
100%. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Juju, and welcome back to the 1% Juju podcast, where we teach you the practical steps to live your life like the 1%. As always, I am so glad that you're back with us today, and we have an amazing guest with us. So I want to dive right into things. There's a few thank yous that I have to do. Obviously, I'm super thankful for you guys continuing to support me, supporting the podcast, and I have a few updates on the way for you guys. But for right now, I need to introduce this amazing guest. Luke, my homie, is with us today. Luke, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
No, we are so glad to have you. And obviously, I know you, but for the people that don't, let people know who are you, what do you do, and how do you help people? How do you add value to everyone's life out here?
Yeah, so thanks for the intro. My name is Luke Chase. I'm a realtor in Minneapolis, Minnesota, just in the Twin Cities. I think the last time I saw you, we were in Minnesota. We were having a cigar, at a bonfire, I think. But yeah, that's what I do. And what's fun is I'm in that stage of life where the people around me, my friends and my family, are starting to be like, hey, I want to buy a house. Maybe they're getting married. Maybe they're like a young professional. They're getting some money saved up and they're having this desire to buy a home, and they're trying to figure out like, how do I do this? Should I do this? What do I need to watch out for? So it's been fun to kind of have my actual like everyday job be a valuable asset to like my friends and just my circle. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about that some more, about like how that is actually working out for the people that are in your circle right now. But can you tell us, because you spoke about us like meeting up over a cigar last time we spoke, and you were in my absolute dream job before this, like, which is selling cigar products, correct? And how did you stumble into real estate? How did that happen? How did you make that? What made you make that switch? And how has that been going for you since the last 2.5, 3 years?
Yeah. So when I studied marketing in college, and then right after college, my first job was I was on a creative team for a company that was in the cigar industry. They were basically selling packets to keep the cigars fresh. And it was here in Minneapolis. And I loved that. I knew people at that company before I started working there. It was super fun. I was never really like a cigar guy until I started working there, and then I became one.
Yeah.
And now I am to this day. So I picked up a cigar habit a little bit, or I should say hobby. But what kind of made me do a pretty legitimate career change to be a realtor. And it's funny, being a realtor is one of those career changes I feel like you see people make and you're like, oh, classic, they're going to be a realtor now.
Yeah.
But I've been blessed to actually make it I've been somewhat, successful with it. I think it's scary to make that career jump whenever you do, coming from a salary job to 100% commission job.
Yep.
It's like, I don't get a paycheck unless I, unless I actually help people sell or buy a home. And so, the reason I made that pivot and took that risk is because I think everybody has that moment where they kind of sit down, they've been maybe in their rhythm for a little bit, and they start to think about the future, and they're like, okay, so I got some student loans, or I have some goals, like I want to buy a house or want to buy a nice car, or whatever, or maybe they're saving up for engagement ring, and they're like, okay, if I'm doing the math here with how much money I'm making, I don't think I'm going to accomplish these goals that I need to in the time I want to. So I had a really close friend who I went to college with, who had been in real estate since he graduated. He had started his own team. So I reached out to him and just kind of asked him like, hey, like what was it like being in the real estate space? And at the same time, a few other friends of mine, we started managing some Airbnbs. And I kind of had my eyes open to the whole world of like investing in real estate.
Yep.
And once you see that, you can't really unsee it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like you kind of know what I'm talking about. And so that kind of transformed the way that I think about money, the way I think about saving, the way I think about investing.
Love it. Yeah.
Um, and I was just like, you know what? Like, uh, between like doing like the real estate thing with like Airbnbs, and then also my other like big hobbies is making music, is producing music. I was like,
Yeah.
I want to do a job in one of those two things that I really care about. And my buddy, he convinced me to join his real estate team, and and so I did that. And
No, I love
yeah,
that.
that's what it's been like.
And I think like I want to talk a little bit because I did, I worked my first job out of college was being a financial planner. And I think that I always had that
Oh,
fear of like, so same thing, right? 100% commission job. And I always had that fear of like reaching out to my friends and family and my close one, because I was like afraid of like, they're just going to see me as a paycheck and things like that. But you found a way, and I don't know, like whenever the way you come across, and we're going to talk a little bit more about like what you do from a social media standpoint in a little bit, but you come across as so genuine. And can you tell us about like a little bit like how you were able to do that and not come across as just like, I need to work with you guys because I need a paycheck, because it's a fine middle that you need to like find, right? Like between like realistically, I do need a paycheck, but I also do want to help people, and I do want to, genuinely help you find your dream home.
you nailed it. But that was, I would say, the thing I was most worried about in switching to be a realtor
Mm-hmm.
is that exact thing, is
Yep.
having to tap into your actual friends and family and like be kind of salesy. And
Yep.
like we all have friends that do that. I think like financial advisors is the other one that people think of. And it's like, oh, and then it's on Facebook and they've changed their picture, they're in a suit, and then and then you get a DM like, hey, it's been a while, we should catch up. And you're like, no.
100%.
So we have both been in that situation, but I was really, really sensitive to being that way. And I really did not want to be that way. And so I took a decent amount of time being like, could I be a realtor and not be that guy and
Yep.
actually be the helpful guy? And I found some ways, I thought of some ways that I could do that. And I decided to take that jump. And I've been relentlessly committed to just like, how about I position myself as like, I'm a normal guy like everyone else is.
Yep.
I just happen to spend my day all day researching about real estate. And then I'm going to help you basically educate you on that and be your advocate when you go to make that decision and go buy a house. So that's been kind of my North Star, is trying to be helpful instead of be salesy.
Yeah. No, and like I said, like it's just such a hard thing to find, and like I really commend you for like doing that in like an efficient way, because you absolutely nailed it with the whole, because I've seen, not only have I done it, but I've seen so many people do it, like where you just see them post regular pictures at the lake or whatever it is, and all of a sudden, like you said, like they're in a suit and like now they're reaching out to you, and you're like, oh gosh. But no, 100%. Like I really applaud you for the way you've been able to do it. But love talking about like a career in real estate, but we also want to talk a little bit about the state of real estate right now, and for you being a realtor in 2022. What does that look like? How is it different than maybe like 2 years ago? Because I remember when I left Minnesota, it felt like every young professional that was somewhat responsible was able to, get their way, somewhat responsible financially, sorry, was going to eventually be able to, make their way or find their way into a property. And, I haven't taken a look extensively, sorry, at the market in Minneapolis, but I know that for us in Toronto, that seems almost impossible. But how are you doing when you're looking at the market over there in Minneapolis, or overall when you look at real estate? What comes to mind? Like how is that looking like right now?
Yeah, I think anyone that has even remotely touched the real estate market, whether you're trying to buy a house or whether you're actually in the industry, you absolutely know that it's crazy busy. There's high demand and there's low supply.
Yeah.
So there's more people that want to buy homes than there are homes for sale. And what that means is the price is going up. And so it makes it difficult to get offers accepted. And so that's essentially the state of the Twin Cities market.
Right.
It's the same as Toronto. It's the same as
Mm-hmm.
Toronto.
Yeah. And how are young people navigating that, or I guess your market that you're selling into? Are you finding yourself more drifting towards a different clientele, or are you finding ways for young people to still be able to make their way in, or how are people even navigating that?
Yeah. For me, it has absolutely been finding creative ways to help anybody buy a house that wants to buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
And there's ways.
Yep.
And I think that's, if I may, one of the benefits of working with a full-time realtor is they're able to be creative when it comes to helping a particular person in a particular situation go buy a home. And like different people have different problems. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, let's say you're like a young married couple, both people make a ton of money and you have a lot of money in savings. You're not going to have that hard of a time, getting an offer accepted, because we can offer, the highest price. You have a strong down payment. Those are two things that people observe on an offer.
Right.
And we can do a few other things. And then boom, you can kind of get what you want, like you would hope when you were
Mm-hmm.
going out shopping for something. It's the folks who don't have a ton of money coming in on a monthly basis, who don't have a huge, like savings account really built up for a home. Then we have to get, creative with a few things. But between looking into grant programs, there's a couple like really legit grant programs in the Twin Cities.
Yeah.
Some are not that good, some are really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
um that's super helpful to help people who are single, especially, or if they're teachers, or whatever, like people who love their career, but maybe there's like a ceiling on how much money they're going to make every year.
Mm-hmm.
Helping those people has been a big part of what I do, and it's totally possible. And then the other thing too is like, when it comes to like a really busy market, there's ways just through like legwork and putting in the time and the energy to kind of get out ahead of the pack.
Yep.
That's like, listen, if you're struggling to get a home, these are things that are just like a given that you can do to put yourself at an advantage versus other people who are just kind of like sitting back. And so between those things, we're able to get like all sorts of people, offers accepted on homes in the Twin Cities, which is one of the busier markets
Yeah.
in the country.
No, and I love that you mentioned that, because and that gives a little bit of hope to a lot of people, because realistically, like, that's been one of the main way for people to build wealth, right? And a lot of people are feeling right now like they can't even get an entry point with how hard
Mm-hmm.
it is to get into the market. But like you said, I know that there's a lot of grants here in Canada as a whole. So just the fact that you're mentioning here, there's a lot of grants in Minnesota or in the Twin Cities. There has to be other grants, everywhere else, wherever people are listening to this. So put a little bit of work and take and do some research. At the end of the day, there are ways that, whether it's governments or people are looking to help people get into the market. But I want
Mm-hmm.
to I want to speak a little bit about the whole, rent versus buy debate. And from what you're saying, is it always appropriate for a person to get into a home? Because, I've seen that a lot of times where a lot of people, or, a lot of realtors may say, well, look what you're spending on rent every month. Just go ahead and buy a place. The mortgage is
Mm-hmm.
going to be the same, but there is a whole, from being a homeowner, there is so many other payments that come with being a homeowner that people often don't think about. And it's not down to only your mortgage payment versus your rent, and obviously you're building equity, but there's also other things to keep into consideration. So where do you stand on that debate, and who do you think is appropriate to maybe go and buy? And for who, if they're listening right now, who should take a little bit more time, maybe renting and putting themselves in a better position?
That's a great question. I don't think buying a home is for everybody at,
Mhm.
every stage of life. I think there's absolutely a stage in life where it's like, hey, it's probably wisest if I just rent right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the really good candidates for people to rent are going to be people who maybe their income is not steady.
Mm.
Uh, maybe they don't even know where they want to live for the foreseeable future. So like the thing about rent is basically, so like how much do you think like average rent at an apartment in Toronto is
Right now,
per month?
a one bedroom, you're probably looking. It depends where, but let's say downtown, you're probably looking at $2,000 a month.
Right. And I would say like in the Twin Cities, it's probably similar. If you're just outside of like downtown, it's probably like 1,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say like basically what rent is on average a $15,000 annual expense
Yep.
that you pay for the luxury of getting to live wherever you want the next year and the
Mm-hmm.
next year and the next year. So you have this awesome flexibility where you can be like, hey, I'm going to go live in Toronto for a year. I'm going to go live in Minnesota for a year. I'm going to
Yep.
go live in California for a year. And so you pay a premium to essentially have that flexibility. And if you don't, and if you're kind of hustling with your career or you don't know where you want to live, it's like, yeah, that's probably smart and like, and that's fun. So, just do that. And then I would say the other candidate for someone who probably should rent is like, if you simply can't budget for more than $1,000 on your monthly housing payment per month, you probably just got to try to find cheap rent somewhere and like
Mm-hmm.
go live with roommates. So like if
Yep.
you can't afford it, you can't afford it. And that's
Right.
fine. That's fine. I think where it starts to be really smart to go take advantage of of the benefits of home ownership is when, okay, I don't need that flexibility to hop around, like year over year. It's like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I want to live in the Twin Cities. Like I've made that decision. I have a job here. I'm going to be living here. It's like, okay, cool. Check. If you have the ability to budget for more than $1,000 towards your housing each month, it's like you should start to consider. I think like I could be a great candidate for owning a home and
Right.
like
Right. Right.
enjoying having my own place and then not having to forfeit 100% of that rent payment and just put it in the shredder every month. You start
Mm-hmm.
to pay down the principal, which is all like recoupable. And then I would say the third, and this is like hands down, if you're a married couple and
Mm.
you're like, hey, we're going to live in one spot, you have two incomes. It's so much easier to put your money together for down payment and to afford a monthly housing payment being a mortgage. If you're a married couple, it's like, bang, you are already an awesome candidate to buy a home.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I like, because one thing that I want to touch on a little more is the flexibility to move wherever. Because I kind of have my own opinion where a lot of people may just say like, oh well, can't I just put the place for rent, right? But that comes with other issues, and I don't know if you want to maybe discuss that for a second or like talk about some things to keep in mind when it comes to actually renting out a home that people may not be thinking about when they think like, oh well, I'll just pack up my bags and go move somewhere else and put the place for rent.
So are you talking like if you own a home and then you move out of it and then
Mm-hmm.
use it as a rental?
That's correct. Yeah.
I think it's super smart. I think it's awesome. I think essentially what's happening when you do that is it's like, okay, let's say my mortgage payment for that house is, like $1,800.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I can rent out the whole house for $2,000.
Yep.
And you go live somewhere else. It's like, okay, so I'm making $200 profit each month. Is that really, does it really make a dent in anything? The biggest, the biggest benefit of having that home as a rental is essentially, let's say that home is worth $300,000 and
Mm-hmm.
you only filled up the bucket by like, 3% when you put your down payment down.
Right. Right. Right.
Then since you have renters in there, what they're going to do is they're going to start to pay the home off for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then in a bunch of years, all of a sudden you might have like $50,000 paid off on that home and other people paid it off for you.
Yep.
And then and not to mention that maybe in 3 years, that thing appreciated by 50 grand.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I have 100 grand of equity in that home
Where you
just
only paid
just for keeping
3%.
when you only paid 3%. So you were only $10,000 to $15,000 out of pocket for that home. Now, 3 years later, you're like, holy crap, I have $100,000 worth of equity in here, and you can sell it. And then that's how much money goes into your checking account,
Right.
or you can refinance and pull money out. Um, I think that it's super powerful, and I think people I think people underestimate the benefit, and I think they overestimate the risks and the responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. No,
Yeah,
that
I do. I do.
and can you talk about like because those risks and responsibilities you can also outsource them. Like, have you seen a lot? Like, do you work with a lot of investors, and what are some things that they do to actually? Because the reality is, like, when I look at myself and like the reason I invest in real estate is not so I can like sit there and play with pipes all the time and
Yeah.
paint different places. I invest in real estate because I one day want to have the freedom, right, to live my life, be with my family, and things of that nature. So in those responsibilities, there's so much that you can outsource that is so worth it when you look at like the benefits that can come in, especially when you talk about some of the numbers that you just shared.
Yeah, I agree. Like for example, I just bought a property in Minneapolis, a rental property, and there's people that that are living there. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, um, it snowed like crazy. Like 2 nights ago, it snowed like a foot. And I have a guy who plows the alley and the driveway for me.
Right.
And so I pay that for a little bit, or sorry, I pay a little bit for that, and I don't have to go there and snow blow it. I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
require them to go, shovel it. And that essentially keeps the property to be at, like a minimal, hassle. Of course, you're right. You own investment properties. There's stuff that goes wrong, and um, I think it's really valuable to like have a little, like a little note in your phone. It's like, okay, like here's my plumber and his phone number.
Yeah, yeah,
Here's
yeah.
here's
Mm-hmm.
here's my handyman, and like here's his phone number. And so if anything does go wrong, bang, you call him. Hey, can you get in? What's the price going to be? And then hopefully, if you're being wise, what you're doing is you're setting aside some of your monthly cash flow from the rent every month towards those expenses. So you're not stressed out when those things pop up.
Yep.
And ultimately, you're using that cash flow as a little bit of profit, but then it's just kind of keeping the maintenance, like up and running. And then you're kind of hopefully mostly stress free. And then ultimately, what you're banking on is people filling up that piggy bank of equity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's how I kind of look at it.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, like when you like
What have you had any crazy like experiences with any of your investment properties where it's like, dang, this kind of makes me question whether I should be owning properties?
not like with tenants, like not like I'm thinking now. I think that one time, like I just had, and it was like something simple where I could just drive up there. Um, like I think that something something was wrong with like the plumbing, and like I just went over there and I was like, okay, I'll come check it out. And like it was just a screw that came undone, and I was able to screw it back on like pretty
Mm,
easily with a YouTube video. But like I haven't gotten like that crazy of an experience, but I'm still wait. Like I'm preparing for it. But
yeah.
like that's what you say, because I always see everything in real estate. Like since I started investing, because of my experience with 100% commission, I'm sure you're the same way. I always understand that like I can't just spend what comes in, right? So like if my monthly cash flow is like you mentioned that $200, I know for a fact that I can't spend that $200, right? Like I have to pay myself a salary out of that, like that $200, with whether it's $50 or whether it's $100, and then the rest goes into essentially the business account, which goes towards getting ready if I don't have tenants for a couple months, or if I don't have any or if there's an issue in the place and I need to fix it. Oh yeah, I did have one. The first actually, like I just remember the story. So the first person I had in my fix my dishwasher in one of my places, they came and they put the wire, they didn't put the wires in right, or the plumbing in right. And basically, the first time that tenant turned on the dishwasher, it filled up with water. And he was like, I don't really use the dishwasher, but like this is what happened when I tried once. Probably should check that out. And when the plumber came back to fix it, like I paid another plumber to come and fix it. He was like, oh yeah, if you would have turned it on again, your whole place would have been flooded. And I'm like, great, that's
Mm.
amazing. So I escaped like a really bad one, but yeah, so far I've been lucky. How about you? Have you had any crazy experiences?
No, and luckily I haven't yet. I'm also a brand new property owner, being
Mm-hmm.
self-employed. It's taken me 2 years to then go be approved for a home loan. So that's something to keep in mind when you're self-employed. But um, I will say this, like, here for me as an investment property owner, I don't want to be stressed out in the middle of the night. There's a flood, there's a
Yeah,
this, there's a
yeah,
that. I don't want that. Um, I don't think anyone wants that. And I think that fear definitely prevents people from getting into the real estate investing game.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it definitely was something that I had to think long and hard about. Um, Personally, and I hope this helps your listeners, like, this is where I rest my hat on, is like, I have homeowners insurance
Mm-hmm.
and I have flood insurance as a part of that. And so if something floods or if something backs up, it's going to be paid for.
Right.
Okay, so that's nice. Now it's a big hassle. Okay, yes, but it's. I think you make a good point. There's people that you can outsource.
Mm-hmm.
There's other investors that have come before us that we can ask for advice on. There's property management companies that make life a lot easier. And then I think the final thing that I really go back to is, it's like, okay, yeah, so owning a rental property is a risk. It's a risk on your time, on your money, things like that. But gosh, there is a risk to not investing.
I was gonna say there's always a risk of doing nothing as well. Yeah.
Like, I saw this TikTok, and it was this guy. It was like, wait till they hand you the bill for not trying.
Yeah.
Wait till they hand you the bill for not investing. And it's
Yep.
like, it's so true. I personally know people who are 30 to 35 years old right now,
Mm-hmm.
and have only lived in an apartment. They make, X amount of money, and they don't really have a, a they don't really have much to their name in terms of money, and
Mm-hmm.
their ability to go buy anything like meaningful is like pretty limited. And
Yeah.
then I know people who are the same age who they went and they just bought a condo when they
Mm-hmm.
were young, and it wasn't that awesome, but they made it cute and they made it fun. And then they sold it for 50 grand more a few years later. And now they're
Right.
living in a nicer house. And now they probably have $100,000 or $200,000 to their name
Mm-hmm.
in equity. And it's like, okay, so the risk for not investing in real estate, in my eyes, this is what I'm subscribing to, the mindset that I'm subscribing to. The risk for not investing is like $100,000 every 5 to 10 years
Right. Right. Right.
that I could have, that I won't have.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree with that. And I think that at the end of the day, like when it comes to risk, is really take some time, educate yourself, and like understand what the risks really are, right? Like if you're really afraid of those, understand what they are, understand how to protect against them. Like you mentioned the homeowners insurance, the flood insurance, and all of those things. And now you essentially eliminated that risk, and now you're able to reap all the rewards of it without having to worry all the time about the risk. Because if you go in blind and you're just like, yeah, I'm gonna try something out, right? Like, and just like every single time you get a little bit of a check, you spend it all, or you inflate your lifestyle. Well, now you're not only like you're spending it all, but you're depending on it. And then like over a sudden something goes wrong in one of your property, or a tenant moves out, and now you're like, oh shoot, this is really bad, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like you said, I agree with everything that you said right here. I want to talk about your job a little bit more for a second. And so I'm someone that like I spent a lot of time on like all the websites, right? Realtor.com, you name the real estate websites, whether they're in Minneapolis or here in Canada. And I love finding those properties, reaching out to that realtor directly. But one thing I've also worked with a ton of real estates. I've had some really good experiences. I've had some very harsh experiences where like I just had like a really hard time with some realtors. What is the real advantage of working with a realtor? Because I do really see the value in it. And even though like I'm now able to find like properties on my own, I continue working with realtors. But can you tell me, like, give us the picture of your job for a second. Let's turn this salesy for a quick moment.
Okay. Okay, sure. So are you kind of asking like, okay, why should I go and find a realtor versus when I find a property I like on Zillow, I just email just the listing agent?
Yeah, exactly. And even
Okay.
when it comes to selling your home, because I know there's a few organizations out here that, they just like, you go to them directly, you send them a couple pictures, and they put the listing up on the MLS for you, and you
Yeah.
move forward. So from both ends, why would, what's the advantage of working with a realtor? Because I see it, but people that are listening, why would they want to work with a realtor?
Sure. So let's start with when you're buying a home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the thing that a lot of people kind of want to avoid is they want to avoid having somebody do what's called dual agency. So if you go to this home that you like and you ask the real estate agent that is listing that home to help you with an offer,
Mm-hmm.
they not only now they don't have just your interest in mind, they also have the person that's selling the home. They have their interest in mind.
Yep.
So it can be somewhat of a conflict of interest. Um, and where this can like really come into play is, and this happens all the time, is like um let's say they help you write an offer, you get the offer accepted, and then you do the inspection, and there's an old furnace, there's a
Mm-hmm.
problem with the roof, and then this and that, and you learn that during the inspection. Well, when you're in the inspection period, you have leverage to renegotiate certain things about the agreement to accommodate and to acknowledge the things that you discovered about the inspection. If you have somebody who um, has a conflict of interest, they may not push for you to get the best deal in that situation.
Yep.
And if they personally know the seller, they may actually have their interest in mind a little bit more than yours.
Mm-hmm.
And you might end up just not being advocated for very well.
Yep.
Um, and it may feel a little bit transactional, and you may not really trust that realtor. Um, so that would be like one instance. So if you had your own realtor that you trusted and that advocated for you, and you got into that situation, what I would start to recommend to my client who's in a situation like that is I would say, hey, here's our options. Here's what I think we should do. And I don't want them to buy a house that is going to suck,
Mm-hmm.
because if I'm friends with them, I'm going to see them around. They're going to write a review for me on Zillow, and I'm that's going to be an icky feeling. I want everyone to be super happy with their home purchase when I work with them. And so if I think that this home is, I'm like, hey, you know what? This might be kind of a disaster. This might require a lot more fixes than you think. I may
Mm-hmm.
recommend that we don't buy that home. And they may not have gotten to that mental place to understand maybe it's time to not buy this anymore. And I've had a couple instances where I have saved people from making an unwise purchase, and we've gone and have found something that they like just as much, that's way safer and way smarter. So I would just say, like, the main advantage is working with someone who has exclusively your interests in mind, with the purchase as big as a home. I think that's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, I really have not much to add because, especially you said at the beginning of the podcast that you literally spend your days researching real estate, right? So
Yeah.
the advantage, it really comes in because, like, you actually know, like, yeah, I have a little bit more experience now, but I think about, like, before I did my first deal, I might not even know the impact of a bad furnace or the impact of, I might walk in and be like, oh, well, the trim needs to be replaced. I don't know how much that's going to cost. Right. And
Mm.
so there's a lot of these things, and like replacing a hot water tank, like, say, people might not have no idea what this is going to cost, while someone that has done the research can be like, hey, you know what, for this neighborhood at this price point, with how much money you're gonna have to put into the house, this may not be worth it, right? And it avoids a lot of bad decisions where, personally, well, I probably wouldn't do that, but like, if you're a realtor and you think about someone just coming into the door and saying like, hey, I want to buy this house, I'm like, Sure, no problem. And I had that experience like where I was really lucky recently. I called, I saw a property at a really good deal, and I called the listing agent, and he kind of broke it all down. He was like, "Hey, listen, like it's a triplex, but two of the tenants haven't paid rent in, since the beginning of COVID, and it's been hard to kick them out. The roof needs to be replaced completely, and all those things." And he could have very easily not told me any of those things and just been like, yeah, it's a great deal right now in this market, especially a wonderful deal. And I go in it and I'm way over my head. Right. So,
Yeah.
but not everyone's this lucky, and you can't just count on the fact that like everyone is that good of a person. So, totally agree with having your own representation and how important, that really is. I want to flip over to social media and the social selling aspect of it, and how your experience has been, because we touched on it before starting to record a little bit, but
Mhm.
it's almost like a necessity nowadays. And tell me a little bit about what your experience has been, why you jumped on social media, and like if there's still room for like the old school realtors, and like how successful maybe it's been for you.
Yeah, I think, how should I put this? People our age, like we're just on social media. It's
Mm-hmm.
part of our daily life, and we consume our news there. We get a general pulse of what people's opinions are on social media. That's like, it's just part of our life is online.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to doing business, I think it's not even a conversation anymore that like anyone who wants to be relevant with people of our generation need to be present online and talking about their stuff. Now, there's all sorts of things that you can do to get business that don't involve social media. And like there's real estate agents, awesome, more experienced agents than I on my own team that primarily get their clients through cold calling strangers. Um, that that makes me want to throw up. I don't like that. I like um taking hard to understand concepts, or sometimes complex concepts, making them concise and making them easy to understand, and then communicating them, essentially just like solving the problems that I'm trying to solve for myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where my strengths are, and that's, I mean, social media gives me a good platform to do that, and
Yeah.
it's fun and it's fulfilling for me, and I like it.
Yeah. And there's a reason, and obviously all your links are going to be in the description, but there's a reason I really love your platform and what you're doing, on social media, because there's a lot, and I found that out like myself, like by starting to do a lot of stuff on social media that like we take for granted sometimes. Where even like listen to your content, sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, this is such a simple concept, but then I remind myself like there's a lot of people that like this is not so simple for, but the way you put it is very, like it's very like understandable and digestible for like really just like anyone that like may just have that question, right? And it's a little less intimidating, which is sometimes I think that, and I think that you can relate, like as a realtor, even though when I was a financial planner, I genuinely enjoyed speaking about my job. So like you don't have to pay me for me to speak about what I know. And I think that sometimes people are intimidated, where they're like, I want to ask him a question about real estate, but
Mm.
he's probably going to charge, like I can't, I need to, like if we're going to do something together, I have to pay him and I just can't afford to pay him. And like social media gives that avenue for people to be like, oh, there you go, I had that question, now I know that like once I'm ready to go, this is the person. So like kind of that long-term investment for you, as well. But at this
I
point I'm
appreciate you saying that, man. I
yeah.
appreciate you saying that. And that is exactly why I like to follow people on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Is I start to get to know them. I start to build trust with them if they're speaking truth. And that's so powerful. And it's like, gosh, I would love to provide value to others in the way that people provide value to me. I think people underestimate how much value they can provide to other people.
Yep.
It's like you know a lot. Like
Mm-hmm.
you either work a job that you know a lot about something
Yeah,
very
you're an
specific that
expert at
others don't
something.
know, or you have a hobby that you research all the time and because you're into it. And it's like, you know a lot about something. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like people, I, for a while, I was kind of like, like I had two Instagram accounts at one point where I was putting all my real estate stuff on a different one and then all my personal stuff on the other one. And I got to a point where I was like, man, I think people just like, I like real estate. And if people like me as a person, they're going to want to hear my takes about real estate. And so
Mm-hmm.
if I'm sharing what I'm learning about, and what I'm seeing and what I'm liking and what I'm enjoying in real estate, sweet homes that I'm seeing, whatever, people want to see that. And
Yep.
people don't really mind they don't mind.
Yeah. No, I completely agree because it's nerve wracking. Like, dude, when I started, like, it was almost like I feel like I almost drove my way to like a point where I was like anxious. I'm like, oh, am I gonna piss people off by putting this out there?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's like the randomest people, like people I haven't spoken to in years, that just hit me up and are like, hey man, like, and I'm thinking like, I'm providing value for these strangers, but my friends are probably not listening to this. And like I said, someone that I haven't spoken to in years that's like, hey man, you've been helping me through my journey. You're doing some really good stuff. And I'm like, it's crazy how much like, and this is almost a message to someone out there that's like thinking about putting your whatever or a message out there. It's incredible how much value you can really provide, and how much all as humans, like we know we're an expert at something, right? And that's really, really cool. So I appreciate that. I want to go into we're gonna get into the controversial stuff now. So we're gonna talk. We're not gonna actually talk about politics because I don't do that, but we're gonna speak a little bit about so as a realtor. So right now, and crazy things are going on when it comes to like inflation and all those things. So as a realtor, how much do you pay attention, or how much should someone pay attention to, whether it's government intervention or the lack thereof, and how can that impact the state of real estate and impact their ability to purchase homes or not in the future?
Yeah, that's a heavy question. Um, I'm not a political expert, nor a politician, so I'm not going to pretend to be one.
Yeah.
I think obviously everyone has political opinions to some degree. I have my own, and some are
Mm-hmm.
strong, some aren't. I was at a real estate conference in Las Vegas a few weeks ago with my team, and there was this guy that he asked a question. He goes, because they were kind of preaching on stage, they're like, don't worry about politics, don't worry about the controversial things that
Mm.
are in the news every day, just work and just worry about yourself. And this guy, he was just like, he was like, I'm completely consumed with politics. I watch it on the news, I watch it on social media like every day, and I get
Yeah.
like so upset about it. And the guy on stage just goes, wow. And you could just tell. So this guy on stage, he's like a real estate coach, for other realtors. And he goes on to basically like talk about like, yes, we all have our democratic vote,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately you have way more control over yourself and over your career and how much money you make, and going after your dreams. It's it's more efficient to just focus on yourself and to
Mm-hmm.
not worry about other people getting in your way, like the government and this and that. I'm not saying that it's not okay to have political opinions. I
Right,
think
right,
we
right.
all do. But here's how okay, so you talk about like inflation, like here's how I'm looking at it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone wants to subscribe to this mindset, go ahead. Here's
Yeah.
here's how I'm looking at it. Is So like gas prices are going up, like groceries are going up, rent is going up,
Mm-hmm.
the prices of homes are going up. Um, Here's how I look at it: is like, this is not a new thing that's happening. This is gonna happen for years to come. And I think of it like this. So here's a dollar. This dollar is going down in value,
Yep.
because if you're making the same amount of money at your job year over year, but everything is, more expensive, that means that your purchasing power is less and the value of the dollar is going down. So here's my mindset. What we want to do is we want to trade these for things that go up in value.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think about like a real estate property or buy some stocks,
Yep.
Things like that. And so I'm like, okay, so how do we combat inflation? It's like,
Yep.
well, we take our money that is going down in value and we trade it for things that are going up in value. And
Mm-hmm.
so that is my mindset. It's one track, and it's like, okay, if certain decisions that a certain administration make that makes things, the price gets inflated and this gets more expensive and I have less freedom to do this, or people have less opportunity to do that. It's like, gosh, what can I do to control my own future? And what can I do
Yeah.
this week? And what can I do this month? And if I just stay focused on that, which when I do that, I do awesome things. And I'm like, great, I'm feeling awesome, like about myself.
Mm-hmm.
When I start to believe the lie that other people control my future, I get really bummed out. I get really mad. I get
Yeah.
really frustrated, So that's kind of my high level macro mindset. Was there something specific you wanted me to touch on?
No, I think that's almost like inspiring of a message, because I know we spoke about, we kind of exchanged a few messages that we wanted to speak a little bit about inflation, but I agree so much, because like at the end of the day, inflation isn't new. Like inflation has been around since,
Yeah.
since we really know about, and I really love that perspective on controlling what you can control. And obviously people have circumstances and some of them are harder than others, but that's the reality of life, and just like, what can you do today, and how many, like you said, how many of those dollars can you afford to exchange for something that's going to grow in value for those assets, right?
Right.
And
Right.
making that conscious decision, because the reality is, like, right now there's still a lot of people that are building wealth and they're finding a way, right? Like there's people that are still buying homes one way or another. There's people that are first time home buyers and they're finding ways. So no,
Here's
I
a piece of
really love.
encouragement. Here's kind of a thing that's really been encouraging me lately is, okay, so people get stressed out when they see like home prices like shooting through the roof. They
Mm-hmm.
see, other prices of other things getting inflated. They get stressed. Let me tell you the people who are not stressed about home prices going up. People that own
Own
homes.
homes. Yeah.
They're excited.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah. Yeah.
day, they're on Zillow. They're like, how much is my home worth?
Trust me.
And they're like, yeah, the market went up by X amount. My home is worth X amount more this year. And they're happy. So once you're on the other side of owning appreciating assets, this trend of prices going up and up and up year over year in our economy, that trend creates you wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get on the other side of it, it starts to benefit you.
Yep.
And
Yes.
it's super counterintuitive. It's very counterintuitive. It's scary. It's risky. But I'm telling you, like, I really believe that the risk for not trying is bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's kind of my one piece of advice to people who are thinking about buying a home, but they're scared about it being a seller's market and about, prices being high, is I would say that it's going to be so much harder for you to buy a home in 10 years than it is now.
I was going to ask you about that. Like, what do you see about the outlook? Like, do you see a correction coming up? Like, in your humble opinion, obviously no one can predict it, but like,
Yeah. So I think scratching and clawing to buy your first home now and starting to build equity in that. And then you're just setting aside money, every month for your
mm-hmm.
housing payment like you would for rent. It's a forced savings plan. You're filling up that piggy bank of equity, and you get to recoup that money down the road when you sell it or when you refinance. Like, that's how you're going to afford your dream home.
Yep.
In a very passive way. Now, to answer your question directly about, do we think that the market's going to keep going? Do you think that there's going to be a correction? There's a lot of things that I've been reading that people don't believe we're going to have a housing crash like we did in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of things that contributed to that crash that are not happening right now.
Yep.
if there is a correction, it won't be because of the same reasons that the last one was.
Right.
Um, so it'll be for different reasons. This is the most interesting thing that I have heard lately, and this is what I'm basing my actions off of right now for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, have you heard of the affordability index? Have you heard of that?
That rings a bell, but not super familiar.
So the affordability index, basically what it does is, as it relates to like the housing market, and for example, is it so like on the Twin Cities is in like the top 10 or 12 or 15 metropolises in the United States, like according to the affordability index, and they're
Mm-hmm.
at about 30% from what I was reading. It might have changed since then, but basically what that means is 30% of those in the workforce in the Twin Cities can afford the median home price.
Okay.
And that's high. That's
Yeah.
high. What that indicates, according to those who put out this data, is that home prices are probably going to continue to increase because there's enough people in the Twin Cities that can afford to buy it. Does that make
Wow.
sense?
Okay. Yeah.
For cities that are lower, like 15 or 10% on the affordability index, that means that
Mm-hmm.
only 10 to 15% of people can afford the median home price. That's an indication that prices for homes in that
May
area are probably going to correct because there's not
may
enough people
adjust.
that can buy them. There's obviously other factors at hand, but that's trying to like gather a bunch of factors at once and try to predict what the housing market is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's a really interesting one. And the people who are putting out this data, this could be extreme. This sounds a little extreme to me, but I think that there's some merit to it. They believe that like real estate prices in 10 years could be doubled in the Twin
Wow.
Cities,
Wow. Okay.
and that rent is going to go up by 40%. And so if that's true, like, so Julian, let's say that happens. Like,
Mm-hmm.
let's say that happens. Your decision should literally be like buy as many properties as you can.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, who cares if I have to pay like $300 to get a pipe fixed? Who
Yeah.
cares if I like if you buy a $300 or like a $300,000 property and you buy like five of them,
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna double and you're gonna be a millionaire.
Exactly.
And so if that's true, that should be your mindset. Now, maybe that's not true. Maybe that's like an oversimplified way to look at it,
Yep.
because even though we know historically that real estate goes up over time, it always has. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't go up in a straight line. So it goes down and then it spikes up and then it goes down and spikes up and spikes. So over the long term, like owning real estate has always produced a net gain for people. Where it gets challenging is if you have to sell your home in a dip.
Mm.
That's when you would potentially not experience that gain, right?
Yep.
But if you have that flexibility where you're like, I don't have to sell it, nobody should care if housing prices go down next year if they're not going to sell it next year,
Yeah.
because they're going to come back up in a few years
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to be right back to where you started. So that's how I look at it. Because no one loses their money. No one realizes their loss until they sell at a loss.
Yeah. It's
And
funny
same thing
because
with stocks, I'm sure.
yeah, because even the people like I don't know where I saw this, but like I think I saw a recent study that even the people that bought like at the peak, like right in 2007, right? Like so right before the crash, like even those people like right now have like made a crazy amount of money on their, on their home, if they just held on to it. So obviously if you're at that point in 2008 happens and you lose your job and you have to sell your home, then obviously that's a different story. But if you have the ability to retain to maintain, and like you said, it's the same thing about stocks. You always want to have the mindset of like, buy low, sell high, and that buy low doesn't have to be a certain fixed price. It just has to be lower than the price you're going to sell at. So love you sharing that. Last quick question. Like if you're like a recent grad, a new person, and you're looking at this and you're just afraid, like what would be like the quick piece of advice that you would give people to like start working towards, getting into their first property or into their dream house?
Yeah, I think it's totally normal to be afraid and to be
Mm-hmm.
worried about the responsibilities of owning a property. I think if you're super, super afraid, like crippling anxiety.
Yeah.
But you so badly want to start building equity in something and stop throwing your rent money into the shredder, or you have
Mhm.
parents that are like, you gotta buy, go buy a condo.
Yeah.
Go buy a condo or go buy a townhome, and you pay an association fee every month, but there's less risk, there's less responsibility, there's a little bit less potential for your property like increasing in value
Mhm.
depending on where it is. I maybe shouldn't have said that. That's not always true, but
Yeah. It's so funny
I
because people
yeah.
said that, and I bought my first two homes were condos, and like I'm looking at them now, and it's like, how have I made this much money on condos when people told me like it's fun, and it's true that like I don't think that what you said is false, because realistically, if I would have bought freeholds at the same time, I probably would have made more. But I couldn't afford freeholds at the time, and that's what I could get into, and that's what allowed me to buy freeholds afterwards. So,
Is that what you guys call them in Canada? Freeholds, like a single family home?
a single family, yeah, we,
You call them freeholds. Interesting.
yeah,
I've never heard that term.
yeah, we call them free. Well, we do use the term like single family,
Okay.
but like yeah, if you're like
Freehold.
if it's detached, like especially not like I think that townhomes aren't called that, but like anything that's attached, they will call it a freehold. But I think that's like a very like I don't think that everyone uses that. That's like a very like if you're into real estate term.
Okay.
Yeah.
Funny. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that could be one solution. Um, to me, it's really scary to not be building equity in something and to be throwing away that much money in rent. That
Mhm.
that scares me. I think properly acknowledging that risk, I think helps. Owning your own place is fun. It's
Mhm.
fun. I would say being disciplined with your savings and like putting money aside for repairs and for maintenance so that you're not stressed out. That's going to help. Get really good homeowners insurance. Um, Make a friend with a family member or with a peer who is handy
Yeah.
and who can fix stuff, and have a list of people that you're going to go to in case there's a catastrophic problem. That can relieve a lot of anxiety. And maybe go ask people who have been homeowners for 5 to 10 years and like see what their experience is, and ask
What
them
they've
if they
been
would
through. Yeah.
recommend owning a home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And here's the thing: if you hate it and it's a nightmare, sell it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
and
crazy.
and you'll
Like
be fine.
now that you say that, like I still have yet to meet somebody that's like I've heard a lot of like horror stories. I've heard a lot of people talk about, the hardships of home ownership, but I still have yet to hear of someone like, I wish I went back and never bought this house.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like even the people that have had the craziest of story, they still love real estate and still love home ownership.
Here's maybe another way to kind of think about it also. Here, I gotta plug my computer in so I don't lose you. Hang on a second.
No worries, no worries.
All right, we're safe. um I would think about this too, like here's maybe a question to ask is like, do you envision yourself owning a home when you're married,
Mm-hmm.
owning a home when you have kids and have a family? It's like, okay, so the answer is yes. It's like, all right, um you're going to face the exact same fears and challenges at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you're already at that point and you're like, no, I am at that point, and I'm scared. um I would say take get excited about taking on the call of being a more capable human,
Yeah.
and taking on the meaningful journey of becoming an expert of owning a home. You're going to feel
Mm.
amazing about yourself. You're going to find yourself in conversations with people who don't have that experience and knowledge that you may now have a year later, and you're going to be so happy, and you're going to feel a big sense of like self-confidence that you are in this position, you've taken that risk, you've reaped the reward, and people are going to come asking you questions about owning a home. And like, it's a challenge, man. I think we both would be lying to everybody on this podcast if we said that like owning a home or investing or this and that isn't a risk or a challenge, but it's it's fun and it's worth it. And it's
Yep.
like we become better people, more capable people, smarter people when we do that. And ultimately just like, how should I put it? Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, no, that's super cool, man. No, I do appreciate that everything. There's a lot here that I think I learned. There's a lot of information that was shared here that I think is going to be extremely valuable for everyone. But we're going to hop off. I want to give you the opportunity. Luke, where can the people find you? Where can, obviously, social media, you have a big presence, but you are a realtor. So how can the people connect with you if they're looking to buy their first home in Minnesota or in the Twin Cities?
If they want to connect with me on Instagram, they can go to luke.chase. It's the same thing on TikTok, or you can go to my website, lukechaserealestate.com. And I would love to connect, or you can find me on LinkedIn. If you just have questions, even if you don't live in the Twin Cities area, you just have questions about buying a home. I know realtors in, multiple locations, and I would love just to chop it up with you and just answer questions. I
Yeah.
love talking about real estate and just like solving problems. So
Yeah,
I'd love to
awesome.
chat.
No, I love that because we have listeners all across the US. So and that's the really cool part. Like I've seen that about a lot of realtors. They love to have a conversation. They are busy, so respect their time. But like at the same time, like I know like he's genuine and would love to help eventually. But we will put all those links in the description. So scroll down and check that out. Go connect with Luke. Follow everything that he's doing because he's providing a lot of value, amazing value for free on the internet, which is super cool. But I absolutely loved having you on. So thank you so much once again. We're going to hop off. If you did find something helpful here, make sure that you share the podcast with someone that you care about. That is the only way that this platform grows. And I am super thankful for obviously the growth that we've experienced so far. Make sure you flip over to YouTube, go check out the video version of this podcast, or any other podcast. You get to see our beautiful faces and all of those great things. Also follow us on social media, follow us on all podcasting platform. All those links are in the description as always. But for today, you already know, make sure that you're taking the steps today to ensure that you're 1% closer to your goals than you were yesterday. Thank you for joining, everyone. And thank you for joining, Luke. Have a good one.
You bet. Thanks for having me.